Part 1. The Meeting. The night was quiet in the small coastal town of Evermere. The waves rolled softly against the shore, and the air smelled faintly of salt and lavender from the gardens that lined the narrow streets. Life in Evermere had always been calm, almost too calm, but for Clara, that peace had often felt like loneliness. Clara was 24, a painter who spent her days capturing the restless colors of the sea. Her tiny studio overlooked the harbor, and though she loved her work, the silence of her evenings pressed on her heart. She often walked along the pier at dusk, when the world seemed suspended between day and night, hoping that the ocean breeze would carry away the weight she could not name. It was on one of those evenings, as the last light melted into shades of rose and silver, that she saw him. He stood at the far end of the pier, gazing out toward the horizon as if waiting for something, or someone. His figure was tall, wrapped in a long coat, his hair catching the faint glow of twilight. There was a kind of stillness about him, yet also a quiet sadness, like a man carrying too many unsaid words. Clara hesitated. She rarely spoke to strangers, especially here, where everyone already knew each other. But something about him drew her forward, step by cautious step, until her footsteps echoed softly on the wooden boards. He turned at the sound. His eyes were a deep shade of gray, like storm clouds before rain. For a moment, they simply looked at one another. Clara with curiosity, he with a faint, almost startled smile. "Good evening," he said, his voice low and gentle, as though afraid to disturb the air around them. Clara nodded, suddenly aware of her racing heart. "Good evening," she replied. There was a pause, comfortable and strange at the same time. Then he looked back toward the sea. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" he asked. "The ocean." Clara tilted her head. "Yes," he whispered, almost to himself. "The ocean. And the way it hides as much as it reveals." His words lingered in the air, heavy with meaning she did not understand. But Clara felt it, that same quiet loneliness she had carried, reflected in a stranger's eyes. She didn't know then that this meeting, on a calm evening by the sea, would change everything. Part 2. Conversations by the Sea. In the days that followed, Clara found herself walking to the pier more often than before. At first, she told herself it was only coincidence, a habit born out of her love for the ocean. But deep down, she knew it was because of him. His name was Adrian. He had come to Evermere only a week ago, though he spoke little of why he was there. When Clara asked, he simply smiled with a kind of sadness and said, "Sometimes people come to the sea to remember. Other times, to forget." They began to meet almost every evening. Clara would bring her sketchbook, sitting on the edge of the pier while Adrian leaned against the railing. They spoke quietly, as if the ocean itself were listening. She told him about her paintings, about the way she tried to capture not only the colors, but also the emotions hidden in the waves. He listened with a patience she had never known, his eyes following her every word, as though each was a secret worth keeping. And when he spoke, Clara felt as though the world slowed down. Adrian told her fragments of stories, his travels, the cities he had walked through, the nights he had spent staring at different stars. Yet there was always something he left unsaid, a shadow behind his words. One evening, as the wind grew colder, Clara noticed a silver ring on his finger. Simple, unadorned, yet worn smooth as though it had been touched countless times. "Is it special?" she asked gently, pointing to the ring. Adrian's hand stilled. For a moment, his face grew distant, as if she had opened a door he had hoped would remain closed. Then, quietly, he answered, "Yes, it belonged to someone I loved." The silence that followed was not empty, but heavy. Clara did not ask more, though her heart ached with curiosity and something deeper. Fear, perhaps, that this man she had just begun to know was already bound to a story she could never enter. Still, when he finally looked at her again, there was warmth in his eyes. "Thank you for asking," he said softly. "Most people wouldn't." That night, as Clara walked home, she could not stop thinking about him, about the sadness in his voice, the ring, and the way his presence felt like both a gift and a warning. She did not yet know it, but she was already falling. Part 3. The Hidden Past. The days in Evermere grew shorter, and autumn crept quietly into the town. The air was cooler now, carrying with it the scent of wood smoke and rain. Clara found herself spending more time with Adrian, not just on the pier, but also wandering through the narrow streets, or sitting in her small studio where she painted while he watched in silence. He never interrupted her work, never asked her to explain. Yet when she looked up and saw him studying her with that thoughtful expression, she felt more understood than she ever had before. Still, there were moments when Adrian seemed far away, lost in memories she could not reach. His laughter, rare but beautiful, would vanish as quickly as it came, replaced by a quiet sorrow. One evening, as the two of them walked along the shoreline, Clara gathered the courage to ask, "Adrian, are you staying in Evermere for long?" For a while, he didn't answer. The tide lapped gently at their feet, and the wind tugged at his coat. Finally, he spoke. "I don't know. Some days I think of leaving. Other days, I wonder if I've already stayed too long." Clara's heart tightened. She wanted to ask why, wanted to hold him in that moment and beg him not to disappear. But instead, she said softly, "I hope you stay. At least a little longer." Adrian turned to her then, his gray eyes filled with something she could not name. Longing, perhaps, or regret. Slowly he reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You make it difficult to leave, Clara," he whispered. Her breath caught, and for a heartbeat, the world stood still. The waves, the wind, the stars above, everything seemed to fade, leaving only the two of them. But just as quickly, he stepped back, his hand falling to his side. "I shouldn't," he murmured, almost to himself. Clara wanted to ask why not, but the words stayed trapped in her throat. Instead, they walked on in silence, two shadows stretched by the moonlight, each holding secrets they were not ready to share. That night, Clara lay awake in her bed, staring at the ceiling. She thought of his hand against her cheek, of the sadness in his eyes, of the silver ring he wore like a memory carved into his skin. And she realized something she could no longer deny. She was not only falling in love with Adrian, she was already lost in him. Final part. The last tide. The rain returned to Evermere, soft and endless, and Clara found Adrian once more at the pier. His face was pale, his eyes filled with the weight of unspoken truth. "I have to leave," he said quietly. Her voice trembled. "Why?" Adrian touched the silver ring on his hand. "It belonged to my wife. She's gone. And I've been wandering ever since, carrying her memory. Meeting you." His voice faltered. "It awakened feelings I thought I had buried. But I am not ready to love again." Clara's heart ached, but she stepped closer. "You don't have to be ready. You only have to stay." For a moment, he held her, their lips meeting in a trembling kiss. It was tender, fragile, filled with both promise and farewell. When it ended, Adrian whispered, "If I remain, I will hurt us both." And then he walked away, his figure fading into the mist. Clara stood alone, the sea restless at her feet. Yet though her heart was breaking, she knew love had touched her life. Briefly, painfully, beautifully. And that memory, she realized, would never fade. Epilogue. After the tide. The days passed, and autumn deepened into winter. The pier stood empty, the ocean restless, yet Clara still walked there each evening. She no longer searched the horizon for Adrian's shadow. She knew he was gone, but she carried him with her, in the quiet spaces of her heart. She began to paint again, though her colors had changed. The sea on her canvas was no longer only blue and green, but touched with silver, gray, and soft rose, the colors of their brief moments together. People who saw her work said it felt alive, as if the waves were filled with untold stories. And in a way, they were. Sometimes, on still nights, Clara would close her eyes and imagine him standing beside her, listening to the sea. She did not weep anymore. Instead, she whispered to the wind, "Thank you." For though Adrian had left, he had given her something precious, the certainty that love, however brief, could awaken the heart and make it bloom again. And so, life in Evermere went on, calm, gentle, and eternal as the tide. But for Clara, every wave that kissed the shore carried a memory of the man she had once loved, and the love that had changed her forever. After the epilogue, the quiet year's time moved gently in Evermere. Seasons turned like pages, one after another, each leaving its mark on the town and on Clara's heart. She grew older, though softly, like the fading of twilight into night. Her paintings began to fill not just her small studio, but also homes and galleries far beyond the coast. People admired them for their calm beauty. Yet none knew that each brushstroke carried the memory of a man she had once met by the sea. The end